Hello all. Let's do the last chapter in the ICSE Class 10 Environmental Science syllabus, which is towards a sustainable future. Now, the current generations have been using the natural resources abundantly, and it has also led to the destruction and its overexploitation, which means in the future there will be no natural resources left, and that will obviously affect the quality of life of the future generations. So if there has to be economic development in the future, if there has to be a good quality of life, we have to ensure that the natural resources are maintained and the environmental quality is maintained. For that, sustainable development is the only key. That is the only way forward. So in this unit, we'll see what are the different ways which can lead to a sustainable future. We'll look at the global interdependence, how countries are dependent on each other both economically as well as environmentally. We'll see the different cooperation movements and conferences and treaties that have actually helped in ensuring a good environmental quality. We'll talk about sustainable development and how it affects the developed and developing countries, the role of non-governmental organizations in achieving sustainability, and some technologies which can actually help in achieving a sustainable future. So this is what is present in your unit. Now, when we say global interdependence, it means there is mutual dependence of countries on each other. For what? For commodities like food, energy, minerals, manufactured goods. It might be some kind of information technology, or there could be, international investments and foreign debt could be there. So some kind of dependence on each other for products which you can't produce efficiently yourself. For example, oil. We can't produce enough oil for our population. So we are importing it from, say, Middle Eastern countries. So that kind of, dependence on the economy, that is the trade and flow of goods or services or information or even money, investment, all of that is what we term as economic interdependence. And that has occurred because in the past decades, there has been an expansion on global level. There has been a lot of new information technology. The transportation costs have got reduced. There has been formation of economic blocks. A lot of reforms have come in to liberalize the world economy. So due to all of these reasons, economic growth and interdependence has definitely occurred. There's also environmental interdependence. Earlier, it was thought that only economic development is enough to measure the quality of life. But, because of that, even the developed countries which have very large economies exploited the natural resources of their country as well as other countries. But over a period of time, when serious environmental problems started cropping up, especially in the 1970s, there was realization that no, growth in the economic sector alone does not mean quality of life. For a good quality of life, you have to have economic as well as environmental growth. So with the globalization, there was a lot of environmental decline as well at the global level. But then due to awareness, due to the due to international cooperation, people realize there's a lot of waste being generated. The ocean pollution is on the rise. There's a lot of climate change, acid rain, ozone depletion, many other environmental problems due to the consumerism which was promoted. So local environmental issues were having a global effect, like climate change was a global problem, acid rain was a global problem, or ozone depletion was a global problem. And this was realized by the countries. It was understood that it is harming the earth, and that is why each country is having interdependent, or each country is dependent on the other for ensuring there is good global environmental health. There is to ensure that the environment of the earth is a shared responsibility of all the nations. Every nation has to get involved in it. They have to have a lot of research. They have to educate their people. There has to be training and research directed at health problems. All of that needs to be done by every country in the world, and it is not just the task or responsibility of just the developed nation or only the developing countries. Every country has to now have their hands joined in together to ensure that the global environmental health is improved. So the global environmental health program has mainly three goals. One is the research part. You need to do a lot of scientific understanding of every problem on earth. For example, population explosion or any other kind of environmental issues and effects. We have to study it thoroughly, scientifically. Then that research has to get translated. That scientific knowledge has to get translated into information which is understood by the leaders, by the decision makers, so that they can actually come up with some reforms, they can come up with some ideas, they can implement some health protection programs. So that scientific research has to get translated into information that can be understood by all. And finally, the scientific capacity has to be improved even in countries where there is not enough research being done. So scientific capacity is to improve the ability of countries around the world. Every country should be able to solve their own or their specific environmental problems. So how do we do that? Countries which have the resources should train the international scientists. They should, share their expertise so that the scientific knowledge base can be improved. Unless these three are done, unless every country does it, we'll not be able to improve the environmental health. What it means to say is only if some nations do it. For example, only if the European nations do the research and they apply it and their reforms are good, it's only going to improve the climate locally. But the climate problem is a global problem. So even if Europe does everything right, even if US does everything right, and rest of the world is not following certain reforms or is not doing the right things, it is going to affect Europe and the US as well. So the environmental problems are global problems, and every nation has to take it up as a responsibility to clean it up, or to ensure that the right thing is being done. That is the meaning of global environmental health. Now, trade and aid can be definitely done to reduce this inequality. So, like I said, every nation has to take up research, but then some nations are not able to because of a lot of inequalities that they have. So, how do we reduce those inequalities? One is we could, increase the trade. Trade is the exchange of goods, exchange of services between the countries. So that can help to reduce the inequalities. When there is inflow of money, usually the developed countries will export manufactured goods, and they import the primary products, for example, tea or coffee or some kind of other primary products from the developing countries. So we need to ensure that the trade is improved between developed and developing countries, and that can help in actually reducing the inequality. It can bring in money flow, which will help to promote the research and, ensure the environmental growth and as well as the economic growth. So what we are trying to do here is to reduce the inequalities in income and wealth, because then that will give an economic stability and that will actually reduce the social problems. In fact, if there's no inequality, it will also help us to adopt pro-environment strategies. So everything is related to, environment and economic growth are interrelated. That is what we are trying to say. The second part is aid. If we can't increase the trading, at least we can provide aid. Aid is essentially the redistribution of share of the enormous global wealth to countries and people where it can make a great difference. So some countries have too much of it and other countries have absolutely poor. So in fact in 1970, the world's rich countries had agreed to give 0.7% of their gross national income for international development aid. Of course, the real problem, on ground problem, is that these targets are not met, and there are a lot of hiccups. But if that is done, if every rich country is able to donate a little bit towards countries which don't have anything at all, we'll be able to bridge that economic gap, and that bridging of economic gap can actually help us to adopt pro-environmental strategies. Now, there has been a lot of international cooperation. It's not that we have not been taking up issues of environment on a global basis. That has been happening. There have been a lot of treaties and environmental problems which are solved together. Many international cooperation movements have happened, and these are 5 different international cooperation examples which have been listed in your syllabus and which we'll talk about briefly. The first one is Montreal Protocol. You could say that this is one of the best examples of a successful international cooperation for environment. It was taken up in 1987. It is Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete ozone layer. So when we realized that there are a lot of substances like chlorofluorocarbons or hydrochlorofluorocarbons which are depleting the ozone, which are sort of eating up the ozone, the heads of all the countries met up and they decided in Montreal, which is in Canada, they met up in 1987 and decided that no, we need to put a stop to this. They came up with a lot of reforms. They came up with a lot of different regulations which actually helped us to phase out these ozone depleting substances. So our ozone hole has not been fully cured. It's still recovering. But because we have stopped the production and usage of these ozone depleting substances, the health of the ozone layer has definitely improved. So this is one example where if the leaders of all countries decide to cooperate, we can actually protect and we can actually save the environment. So this is the first one, that is Montreal Protocol. The second that we have is Global Environment Facility, which is also abbreviated as GEF. Now, this is actually a financial mechanism. It's sort of like a trust, or you could say an agency which provides financial aid. So it was established in 1991 to assist the protection of global environment and to promote sustainable development. It basically provides funding to the poor countries for any kind of environmental activities that those countries want to take up. So the focus will be on biodiversity, climate change, international waters, land degradation, waste disposal. These are some of the different focus areas that they have, and they provide aid to countries that need it. The third one is Earth Summit, which was conducted in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So the objective was to come up with a new blueprint for international action on environmental issues as well as development issues. So heads of several countries met and they signed many important conventions like Convention on Climate Change, Convention on Biodiversity. Many important issues were discussed, and it is in this summit that they realized that sustainable development is definitely an attainable goal. We can definitely go for sustainable development, and it was realized that the economic factors, social factors and environmental factors are interdependent and they evolve together. You cannot have only economic development and be happy. No, we need to have all together, and only then can we call it as sustainable development. The importance of sustainable development was realized in the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. The fourth one that we have is the UN's International Conference on Population and Development. So this conference was held in Cairo in 1994, and this conference was a landmark because it transformed the global thinking on population issues and development issues. So they defined an agenda which promoted gender equality, to eradicate poverty, hunger, to achieve universal primary education, to improve the maternal health. So basically this entire conference helped to define the agenda for a better quality of life. They realized, it was in this conference that they realized that it's not just about counting people, it is to make sure that everyone has access to a proper living, good living conditions. So that global thinking was actually set in, or it was introduced, and that became the point of discussion and debate in this conference in Cairo. The last one that we have in your syllabus is the Kyoto Treaty or Kyoto Protocol. This is again a very important protocol which was adopted in Kyoto, Japan in December 1997. This convention was held to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide, because it was leading to a lot of global warming. People realized, the leaders realized that global warming is a serious issue, and to reduce the onset of global warming was the main objective. In fact, Kyoto Protocol is considered as the first step to combat global warming. So a lot of reforms, a lot of strategies were put in place to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions as well as to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide. So these were the 5 different examples of international cooperation. Now after this, what we need to know about is sustainable development. Sustainable development is a concept which is a balance of 3 different pillars, and those are the 3 pillars that have been written over here. The first one is the social pillar. Social pillar is essentially the living conditions of population, good living conditions, equal opportunities for everyone, social well-being should be good. So all of that together is what we call, or what we refer to as the social pillar of sustainable development. The second one is the environmental pillar. Environmental pillar is living within the means of natural resources. So some resources may be more abundant than others in a particular area, but you should consider you should give a thought about the natural resource and ensure that you do not damage the environment. And if you live like that, it means you are taking care of the environmental side, or the environmental pillar of sustainable development. And the last one is the economic pillar. So you can't just keep taking care of the environment and ensuring that everybody is happy. That's not just, those are not just the two things that you need to take care. You absolutely need to take care about the economic side of a nation, of a population as well. So economic pillar is ensuring that, there's consistent operational profit in that country, the resources are being used efficiently, ensuring that there's long-term employment, international trade is good. All of that comprises the economic pillar. So when all three pillars are well balanced, when you have a good balance of three, that's when we achieve sustainable development. And sustainable development means there is development which is meeting the needs of the present generation. However, you do not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That is what we call as sustainable development. So in simpler terms, I need to live, but I also need to ensure that my future generations have to live. I can't be selfish and use up everything. I have to use it in such a way that even the future generations are able to live. That is what we call as sustainable development. So sustainable development is a concept, like I said earlier, which was adapted or formulated in the Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro. And then we have also, come up with some sustainable development agendas which have to be achieved by the year 2030. But then sustainable development is the go-to concept these days. Many industries are, adopting reforms and policies which are in line with the sustainable development goals. So developing countries are, they lack the infrastructure or the policies which are required to implement those sustainable development goals. For example, they may not have enough statistical data, or they may not have the money for research, or they may not be able to successfully plan or make decisions, which is a problem with developing countries. Unless their living conditions are improved, unless their living conditions are enhanced, sustainable development cannot be achieved. It is very difficult to tell a person who's not even having food to eat 3 times a day to take care of the environment. He or she will not, for them, that is not the priority. So in a developing country, the living conditions have to be first improved. Only then can we achieve the sustainable development goals. In fact, one of the sustainable development goals is to ensure there is no poverty. So we need to improve the living conditions in a developing country. On the other hand, developed countries, the living conditions are good, but developed countries use a lot of resources. They place much more pressure on the global environment and the global resources. So that needs to cut down. The developed countries need to take care that they do not, use up the world's resources, and they are also able to contribute to sustainable development. So they should be able to, mobilize the financial resources. They should have capacity building and technology they should share with the other countries. That is the role of the developed countries. So in developing countries, sustainable development can be achieved if we ensure the good quality of life. And in developed countries, we need to encourage the sharing of resources, less usage of resources, sharing of technology and information with the other countries. When we see the non-governmental organizations, NGO stands for non-governmental organization. When we see the non-governmental organizations, their role is that, they are basically a legally constituted organization which is formed by one person or a group of people, but they operate independently of the government. Now, the government cannot reach every place. The natural resources are so spread over the entire geographical boundary that it is even present in remote, inaccessible areas, and it is difficult for only the governmental departments to maintain or look after these resources. So it is a very important, contribution of the NGOs that they are also able to look after these resources. They are able to create awareness, generate awareness amongst the public. They are able to coordinate with the government, or they also can pitch in to monitor the habitat, to manage the habitat. In fact, even in restoration of habitats, many NGOs do play a very important role. So there are many aims in the environmental protection, like sustainable use of resources, or conservation of biodiversity, reduction of pollution, promoting eco-friendly technologies. NGOs can actually step in and help in all of these by doing either generating the awareness, or they can come up with some resource documentation, resource development. They can help the governmental departments. That's how the NGOs play a very important role in ensuring the sustainable future. Now, the last part of this unit is to know about certain technology which will sustain, or which actually helps in developing a sustainable future. The first one is remote sensing satellite. So remote sensing satellite are devices which are sent into space and which use sensors to collect information about the Earth's atmosphere, or the oceans, the land, everything. Now the advantages are that of using a remote sensing satellite over some manual manual data collection is that there is a consistent data collection that comes from remote sensing satellite. So there is homogeneity. They collect the data in a very consistent manner in comparison to manual data collection. The data processing in computer becomes very easy because when the satellite is collecting the data, it's already in the digital form. So it reduces the work of human beings to convert it from paper into a digital form. A lot of the computer processing becomes easier and faster. The frequency of data collection is also more, so you can do periodic monitoring. Not only that, it can also detect the variation in the environment with much greater precision than a manual data collection, and the cost is low. Though the initial cost is huge, the recurring cost of manpower, transport, equipment, all that is reduced when you have a remote sensing satellite. So these satellites are used, they have been used for the applications. When we say, they have been used for deforestation, to study the forest cover over the decades, and so you would know the rate of deforestation, to study and identify land degradation, which are the degraded areas. How do you can even find out the causes from the previous images, or which area was earlier under vegetation and now it is not there. So to study land degradation, to help in bringing out the bring in vegetation in such a degraded land, that is also another application. The third application is to predict floods and drought, because areas which are prone to it, you can actually predict it much before the flood or drought is about to occur, and you can save lives, you can save a lot of the resources. You can study the rainfall, study the surface water conditions. All that can be done very nicely using remote sensing satellites. And the fourth application is in mining, to map an active mine, to map abandoned which mines have been abandoned, to check whether there's any ecological damage that's happening. All of those studies can be done very easily if we have remote sensing satellites in comparison to doing it manually. The second one is having alternate technology. So we have already spoken about this. You can check the video in this link. Alternate technology is where we have technologies which are more environmental friendly than the ones which are being used in the current practice. For example, biogas or composting, or using fuel vehicles which are running on alternate fuels, or using solar panels, wind turbines. All of these are examples of alternate technology which are much better and which will actually help you in developing a sustainable future. So they help in achieving the sustainable development because they reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, they improve the energy security, they provide access to all communities. So eventually, if you keep using these alternate technologies for a decade, eventually you will be able to achieve sustainable development. The last one is biotechnology for food security. This also we have done under the chapter food. So if you use biotechnology, you can actually increase the crop yield because you are using high yielding varieties which are already resistant to stress, which are resistant to drought, which are resistant to the pests. So you can use a lot of resistant varieties. The pest induced losses come down. You can increase the nutritional value of foods because this is very, very important for developing countries. So you can using biotechnology, you can actually introduce some kind of nutrients and vitamins in the food that they regularly eat. That way you can beat, or you can combat malnutrition and malnourishment in developing countries. So these are some technologies which can actually help us to achieve a sustainable future. Now, these were the different topics that we had under this unit, and I hope this video was useful to all of you to understand what are the steps we need to take towards a sustainable future. Thank you.